Hello, I'm going to do another book review. I forgot to get music ready, and that would take time, so I'm just going to go straight into the review. This is Betrand Russell's The Problems of Philosophy. It's a bit different than The Stranger, that's for sure. For one, this is like a pure philosophy book, and The Stranger was more of a novel. That's another thing real fast. People say Ayn Rand wasn't a philosopher because she wrote novels. That's not a good argument, because other philosophy types wrote novels too, and they're considered philosophers. So that's not a good reason. But anyway, yes, this is a very analytic book. It's about truth and reality and stuff like that. And I'm going to see if it's on YouTube. Well, one thing I liked about it is it just pwned Hegelianism. And apparently this entire book, I didn't have to read it because the entire thing is on the internet, on YouTube.
Here to have a being, which is...
Yep, pretty odd stuff. I'll have to link it, but it's all on YouTube, the entire book in audiobook form with like pictures and crap. But basically, Russell said the problem with Hegelianism is it tries to know more than any human could actually possibly ever know. This is at the end of this book. He builds up to this. Basically, he says that knowledge comes from the acquaintance with stuff and the descriptions of stuff. So I have acquaintance with this book because I can read it and see it. And if I never saw this book, but a friend of mine had, they might describe the book and tell me about it, so I know it by description. But by that, it's difficult to believe in Hegelianism. If that's the only way they get to knowledge, it's very difficult, because Hegelianism basically says that there's this whole of it's very metaphysical, but there's this whole of reality, and you can only know parts of reality. But in the same way that you can know bone and then figure out about the whole of the body, you can take what you know, the small amount you know about reality, and try to kind of figure out the whole of reality, and sort of by that figure out exactly how history works and directions going and stuff like that. And he has this whole big system, gigantic Hegelian system. And then Russell says that you can't really know that. You can only know stuff by either sensing it or having a good logical description of it, which just comes back to sense. And based on how we come through knowledge, through recognizing facts and creating theories and stuff, it's very difficult to go from this to, okay, here's the whole of how reality works, here's the whole of everything. He says that we just can't know as much as Hegel thinks we can know, because we can't know exactly the whole dialectic and then sort of tell the future from it. So yeah, there's that. He also came up with he also brought up the inductive principle, which is basically if event A happens and event B happens, and they appear to happen together all the time, the more this happens, the more likelihood, the increased likelihood there is that if one happens, the other will happen. But of course, this doesn't prove that one causes the other. Just because the two come together all the time together, it'd be fallacious to say one causes the other, when it's very possible that there's cause C, and C is what causing A and B to happen. But whenever C happens, A and B happens. So it's not that A causes B, it's that when A happens, B happens. So they're associated. There isn't any causal anything there, which is important. So there's a lot of things in philosophy that when you hear them, you just think, oh, that's obvious, of course. Now, there's lots of things like that. The problem is that there's so many things in philosophy and so many things in logic that when you hear it are like, oh, that's obvious, that you just sort of pass over it like it's not important. And then you realize later that you've apparently been forgetting these obvious things a lot, and you keep committing fallacies. So that's why very close relationship to the fallacies will help someone in life. Like knowing the fallacy of confirming the consequent, which is basically, if I say that I'm driving, that I'm in a car, and then I say I'm in a car, therefore I'm driving, that'd be fallacious, because you can be in a car and not driving. So that's called the affirming consequent fallacy. Well, no, that's the fallacies. You probably find them all on the internet. If you're going to college, you should take a logic course, Intro to Logic. It's very important stuff. And in fact, you can find this guy, Betrand Russell, did a lot for logic. So if you take a logic class, a lot of which we'll learn is some Betrand Russell stuff. And in this book, you can kind of feel that he's very in tune with logic. Logic kind of comes through. This whole book is pretty much about logic. Oh, there's this one little page in this book that most people probably read and just skip over, but I didn't miss. There's this one little. Betrand Russell is very much an atheist, and there's one page where it kind of comes through and then it kind of skips over, so you might not feel it unless you're paying attention very well. But he makes a criticism of Berkeley's idealism. Idealism is pretty much the idea that everything we know is mental. I know that I drank water just now because I have the idea of it. Therefore, all reality is just in our heads. It's all mental. But then, I forgot Russell made an attack on that, which is, I think it was basically like, where do the mental ideas come from? So I mean, if there's no humans looking at a tree at that moment, does the tree disappear? Which of course it doesn't disappear when no one's looking at it. So where do these mental thoughts come from then? If everything is mental, how do we know? Because I'm one of those people, and I think a lot of people in Anglosphere, which I've seen individual autonomy's videos. So now I'm using the word Anglosphere. He's got to me, somewhat. But it seems to me that for us to have sense data of things, there has to be material substances. The material substances are shooting out sense data, and we get the sense data with our sense organs. But idealists don't say that. Idealists just say that we have thoughts of the things that we sense. Therefore, it's just mental constructions. So basically, Bishop Berkeley of the idealist camp did what lots of Christians did when they're in this kind of when they've kind of been pushed into a corner, is they just filled the gap with God and just said that God gives us our ideas. God created all these objects that give us these thoughts. So God's the one who puts the thought of the computer, which I'm in front of, into my mind. Therefore, to me, there's a computer there because God said so. Which this happens a lot. I think that Richard Dawkins made that accusation that Christians do a lot. Whenever they don't know something, they just postulate God as the answer. And Bishop Berkeley kind of did that too. Which his name is Bishop, but he's a bishop because I think he might actually be a bishop, a philosophic bishop. But yeah, that was a pretty, Russell's atheism kind of gets through there, and it's a pretty big attack on Berkeley's whole thing because. It's the same with Descartes. I don't mean to go too much in a tangent, but Descartes' entire system relies on belief in God, because he digs himself a hole, and the only way out of that hole is to say is to use God, to say that God exists and he would never lie to us. That's his only way out of this hole. See, that's kind of the problem with system building too, which is why system building is not in vogue in philosophy anymore. It's because people have a habit of digging themselves in the holes like that, and then not being able to dig themselves out. Robert Nozick, Anarchy, State, and Utopia, talks about this a lot more in his introduction to his book, which is really good, about how philosophers used to just sort of put ideas together into a thing, and then use tape and rope to try and get it to kind of metaphorically to fit together, and then it kind of never really fits together anyway. Why system building is kind of not a way to go so much. And I guess that's my American influence on me, because that's what Anglo-spheric philosophy says, analytic philosophy sort of says. It's very anti-metaphysics. Which there are a lot of continentals that became like this, but those continentals moved to Great Britain anyway. So like Wittgenstein was born on the continent, but he didn't have, but he sort of moved to Britain, and so I guess in a way he can count himself as an honorary Briton, even though his name is Wittgenstein and he has an accent, or had an accent. He's dead now. Yes, this is a good book. It's a little difficult, but it's still a pretty good introductory book on it. Yeah, he also has a Kant section that's pretty good. About, oh yeah, it has a good section about analytic and synthetic dichotomy. There's a good chapter on there. I think 2 chapters might actually be on the whole Kant thing, which is basically analytic is like experience, so it's a posteriori. So like me feeling this keyboard is some analytic, and me feeling it and knowing about it, knowing the universals, smoothness and blackness, is analytic stuff. But synthetic knowledge is stuff that is kind of outside that, because it used to be that people used to think that knowledge is just senses, but there's some things that you can't sense, like 2 + 2 = 4 is the example. 2 + 2 = 4 is synthetic because you can't experience 2 + 2 = 4. You can experience analytical knowledge that's kind of similar, like, but not entirely, because once it's like 2 apples and 2 apples is 4 apples, that becomes analytic knowledge, because you have to know of these two. You have to know each individual apple. But synthetic knowledge of 2 + 2 = 4 is beyond that, which is basically to say that 1,000 million years from now, if you have 2 things and 2 other things, you'll have 4 things. That's synthetic. Whereas it becomes analytic if you say, if you're talking about particulars. Synthetics is purely universalized thought. Analytic is more of a combining of particular and universals, which if you don't know philosophy, universals is pretty much like the word white is a universal statement referring to all things that are white, whereas a particular would be like this page is white. White would be the universal, but this would be referring to a particular, whereas page would be a universal. Although Hegelians would argue that this is also a universal. But just for clarity's sake, I think that the word this would be particular, whereas page and white are universal. I don't know where is would stand. Is more of a relational statement, which Russell also talks about relations, about how relations are universals too. Whenever you say this comes after that, comes after is a universal concept which always relates to ideas. It's not a particular, and he says noticing that's pretty dang important. So yes, this is probably one of those videos where if you're not into philosophy, you've probably already stopped watching, because you're probably like, what the heck is this boring crap? Maybe if I showed you my dog, it would become a more interesting video. In fact, I might add Betrand Russell, The Problems of Philosophy, plus Jack Russell. Yeah, in fact, I'm going to do that because Betrand Russell, Jack Russell, similar name. So yeah, see, Jack Russell / Betrand Russell and The Problems of Philosophy will probably be the name. Oh yeah, my dog's name is Rukia, by the way. Yeah. She's all white except for these 2 dots by her, one by her eye here and by the other eye here. Everything else is white except for around the eyes. So yeah, that is all. I literally don't like making videos this long, but this book is, even though it's only 162 pages, it's 161 pages. It's really condensed. There's a lot in here. Each chapter is like mind-blowing. It's a really good book. Check it out. Yeah.